My name is Jamie Walker. I own a company called Walker Home Design, and I've decided to start a podcast called Design and Drive. So welcome to episode 1. This is where the rubber meets the road. For years, I've seen other guys doing podcasts and being the expert and influencer, and so I thought I'd throw my hat in the ring a little bit. I've decided to call it Design and Drive because not only are we going to talk to builders and craftsmen and architects and interior designers, plumbers, electricians, but a lot of these contractor type people collect cars. So I thought it'd be cool to also have a little fun side to what we're going to be talking about. What qualifies me to be here? Well, I know people with cameras and audio equipment, and so I also have a little bit of background in building homes and designing homes. I've designed over 4,000 homes and remodels over a 30-year career. And so one of the purposes of this podcast is to help people that are getting ready to build their homes, hopefully save a lot of their headaches and problems that they're going to have when they go to build. I'm going to share a lot of the problems I've discovered when I built my own homes too. When you build custom homes for yourself or you go to remodel something, inevitably you're going to have problems. And so I'm going to try to help other people navigate that so that they don't run into the same problems. Before I get too far into that kind of stuff, though, let me give you a little bit of background. So I grew up in a small farming town in Oregon, and I think there was about 2,500 people in our city. And my dad and my grandpa and my parents and my grandparents were kind of close, so we lived in the same town. And my grandpa would help my dad build a house. And he would do that when he got home from work and on weekends. And it would take about a year for him to build a house. And then we would move into it. And we would live in it for a couple of years. And as soon as the grass started coming up, the for sale sign would pop up. And he would sell that house, make a little bit of money, roll that into the next one, and do it all over again. He did that, I think, 5 or 6 times. The nice thing about it was we lived in the same town, so we didn't have to switch schools or friends. We just moved to a different street or a different neighborhood. So it was kind of that old, farming town where everybody kind of knows everybody. I learned a lot from my parents working part-time on these houses. We would live in a single wide trailer house on an acre of land out in this farm area. And gradually the house would get built up, and then we would sell the trailer, move into the house, live in it a couple years, and then rinse and repeat, kind of the same thing. Now, as a young kid, I remember riding my big wheel. I don't know if you know what those are, but they're like a little plastic motorcycle, and we'd pedal around on the floor of the house. I think I remember doing that when I was 4 or 5 years old. And as I got older, they would let me start being part of the build project. So our brothers and I would get to nail some studs, or pretty soon we'd get big enough to lift drywall and put it in place. And then when we got to be teenagers, we were on the roof putting on shingles and things like that. So we were around it a lot. And even today, when I go onto a job site that's being framed or drywalled, I get that smell and I feel like I want to go build something again. But it influenced a lot of my career choice. I remember when I was in the 5th grade, my friends and I would be drawing a lot of stuff at lunchtime. And if it was raining outside, like it usually did in Oregon, we'd go inside and we'd basically start drawing things. And one day my teachers came up to me, and my best friend and I were drawing, and she said, "Oh, we'd like to invite you to be in the advanced art class." So I got to do that in 5th and 6th grade, which allowed me a lot more access to drawing. And I thought, well, I'd much rather be drawing houses than outside hammering nails in a rainstorm. So I thought, maybe architecture is a career that could kick in for me. A few years after that, a popular game started to emerge called Dungeons and Dragons. And so my cousins and I, on weekends, we would sit around a table like this and start drawing parts of monsters and then pass it around to each person at the table. So one of us would start drawing the head, the other one would put the face on it, the next one would put a tail or a body, and after about a half an hour, 45 minutes, we'd each get a turn to draw this 2 or 3 times and turn it into some creature. Well, Dungeons and Dragons got more and more popular, and I started drawing castles. And all of my castles and dungeons had secret passages. So other kids that would play the game would hire me to take over and draw them different castles and things like that. And they'd actually pay me a few bucks to do it. It was kind of cool. And so I think a lot of that led to the development of drawing plans. When I got into high school, then I naturally got into the architecture program and got to design and draw and stuff like that, and won some awards, and it kind of set me on fire to get going. One of the things I also did as a kid was play a lot with Legos, and it helped me develop a way to put plans together that were easy to build or easy to read. A few years ago, I did some research, and Lego actually wins national and worldwide awards for how easy their plans are to follow. I've never once had to cut open a Lego to get it to fit on a race car or a spaceship or something like that. So I would take the idea of Lego's directions, and then when I would be doing a weekend job for my dad, like laying carpet or putting up drywall or plywood, I noticed all those pieces came in certain sizes. And so I thought, well, what if one day I could design my architectural drawings to be kind of like grown-up Legos, where everything just fit naturally. So a lot of that developed and became a really cool set of plans that we've come to work on. Some of the other things that I think built this into a starting business was the work ethic that I got from my grandparents and my mom and dad. My grandpa was a janitor at a local school and was always doing stuff with his hands. My grandma was a school teacher, so I'd always go to her house on Thursdays to get ready for spelling tests on Fridays. My mom cleaned relentlessly. I had 4 brothers, so our house was always dirty. And I still remember waking up at night at midnight, hearing the vacuum going. And she was a pretty big clean freak. And my dad, he held down a full-time job. Then he would build houses at night when he got home. And then in the summertime, the place he worked was called Agri-Pack. It was like a cannery. So if you think about canned food at a grocery store, he worked at a place and did sheet metal work while he was going to school to get an electrician's license and coaching our baseball, softball teams. And in the summer, he would take graveyard shift. And I don't know when he slept, but he did a lot of work and kind of taught me not to back down on that. Some of the other interesting things that kind of built how I think I turned out was some of the early jobs I had. The very first organized job that I got as a kid, I remember I had turned 12 years old, and my parents said, now you can legally go work and get paid. So I said, well, where should I go? And they said, well, you can't work at a restaurant because you're not old enough, but you can go work out on the farm. So a farmer that I worked for, or at least interviewed with, was named Gordon Hinsey, and he was probably in his 20s, kind of a hippie guy, like a lot of the guys in Oregon. But his parents had a farm, and it was hundreds of acres, called Hinsey's Farm. And they had strawberries, raspberries, corn, peaches, apples, cherries, every kind of fruit and vegetable you could think of, green beans. And when I turned 12, I went down, interviewed with them, and they said, well, we'll see how good you are, and we're going to pay you by the pound. And it was June, school had just got out, so I said, okay, well, how much a pound? And they told me the number, and I didn't know how to relate that to anything. It was like 10 cents a pound or 12 cents a pound or something. And so we basically got buckets and picked strawberries in rows. And at the end of the day, I took home a whopping $2.25 after like 6 hours of work. And at least it was my money, and I felt proud about it, and it was exciting. And I did that for a week and ended up with like $12 that week or something. And they said, hey, you're a great worker, come on back. And I'm sure I made them a ton of money. I wasn't the best picker, but it was fun to accomplish something and go out and work and do that. So I did that for 4 years, I think, just working on my hands and knees in the dirt, picking strawberries, and then raspberries would come on next, and then cherries and green beans and all of that. And after a while, I got bitter, right? A lot of times you work jobs like that, you get a little angry. You're like, oh, I need more money. I'm going on strike. And so me and my 12-year-old friends would sing our little indentured servant songs out in the roughness of the strawberry fields. And one day I was complaining to my friend Brian. He was on the other side of, I think it was raspberries we were picking. And I was just complaining away. And I was like, man, they need to pay us 14 cents a pound. This 12 cents isn't worth anything. How am I supposed to, get enough school supplies for next year? And I can't believe the hours. Why do we have to be here at 6 a.m? And just everything I could think of, I was complaining about. And all of a sudden, Brian got quiet. I'm like, well, what do you think? Don't you support me? Shouldn't we go? We need to go tell the boss, what's up. And just then Gordon poked his head over the top of the raspberry bushes, and he's like, well, if you don't like it here, get out. So I was a stubborn little kid, so I stood up and walked off the job. And I got home about, I don't know, maybe 11 o'clock, and usually I didn't get home till 2 or 3. And my mom looks at me, she's like, why are you home so early? I said, oh, I walked off. I got fired. Why? What'd you do? And I'm like, oh, I was just complaining about the job and what we're not getting paid, and we need to get paid more money. And I think she slapped me or spanked my little bottom and said, you get on the phone right now and you apologize. And so I tucked my tail between my legs and called up Gordon and said, I'm so sorry. Can I have my job back? And he's like, yes, you can. So I went back for another few years and did that. And it taught me a lot of lessons about not everything is easy in life. And sometimes I think the real lesson I learned was it's a lot easier to do hard things when you don't have to, so that when you reach a point in your life and you have to do hard things, they become a lot easier. So that was one of the first jobs I had. It taught me hard work. Up early in the morning, it was never easy. You didn't make a lot of money, but you felt a sense of accomplishment. And I don't know if I was cursed or blessed to have that kind of surrounding and atmosphere my whole teenage years. But I did that job for 4 years. And meanwhile, some of my other friends were getting jobs at restaurants and gas stations and things like that. And I would go and interview at those places, and I never got hired. It was pretty sad. I'd wear my Letterman's jacket because I was first team All-State in soccer and second team All-State in baseball. And I had a letter in basketball. I was a 3-sport letterman. I had all this success. I'm like, surely these companies will want to hire a team captain, most valuable player type person. And yet these sophomores and freshmen were getting hired. And here I was a junior and I was getting thrown out. I don't know what it was, but it really hurt my confidence. And so I would have to go. I got some of the jobs I had that taught me some of these lessons were I worked at a fruit stand on the side of the road for one summer. I detailed cars. I actually, when I got into college, I did landscaping that helped me get through my first year of college. That was a supplement to some of the scholarships I had. I was a garbage man. I remember the winter of 1988-89, I was a garbage man, and I would dress in like a hazmat suit, and I would empty these 50-gallon barrels in the back of a truck, and it was dirty and gross and just nasty. I remember one time I finally got hired to work at a pizza restaurant, and I was so excited. I'd memorized all their recipes. I was excited to flip that dough in the air and be on the other side of that glass, those pizza restaurants where you sit down and you can go in there and watch them make it. And all the kids step up on there was a little platform and all these kids could watch you making pizzas. I was so excited to put on a show. And they said, you're hired. When can you start? And I said, well, I'm going out of town on a family vacation. I'll start in 10 days. And they're like, oh, we need you now. Sorry, you can't work here. I was so close to getting that first job. And when I came back, they'd already hired somebody else. So I kind of got stuck there. My second year in college, I actually got a job as a nurse's aide. I had 0 qualifications to be a nurse's aide, but they were so desperate. They were hiring college kids to come and change diapers on 85, 90-year-old people and clean up after them. And I'm surprised I didn't pass out, but it made me tougher. And I had to work graveyard shift doing that. And I was going to school full time. And I'm sure I was just barely breaking even on money. But it was those kind of life lessons that I think calloused me to where I feel almost zero pain on doing tough stuff. And I wish a lot of kids could do that and have those kind of experiences to build them up. I think it's also what helped me to understand when you start a business that it's not easy, and there's no easy way to start a business, and there's a lot of stumbling. And I'm all about systems and processes. And when I don't see a process work or run smoothly, I get frustrated. I remember when I first started Walker Home Design, it was May of 2000. And the interesting thing about it was it came to happen without a lot of planning. And I was working for a big time builder here in Utah. And I'd finally it was my second real job. I got hired to work for a builder for about 6 months, and then they divided up the company, and I went back and got hired for this other builder, biggest builder in Utah at the time. And I had actually, when I got hired there, they had hired me at the same time as this other builder, but I took the other job. After 6 months, I went back to try to see if they would hire me back, and I couldn't get in to talk to the front desk or the people that had interviewed me before. And so that gatekeeper there was so tough to try to get into. And I just thought to myself one day, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to put on a suit and tie and pretend like I have an interview and walk in, and hopefully the guy's there. And so I said a little prayer, put on a suit and tie, and walked in the front door of the biggest builder in Utah. And when I looked at the secretary, I thought to myself, that's the lady that won't get me an interview, and she's going to kick me right out of here. And so I sucked it up a little bit, and I just pretended like I knew what I was doing. And I said, how you doing? She's like, hi, can I help you? I said, I've got an interview with so-and-so today, and my name's Jamie Walker. And she said, huh? She pulled up her little calendar and looked at it. She's like, I don't have you on the schedule. I said, well, if you could just go tell him I'm here. And she said, well, I don't know. And just then, the guy that I went to go see came walking down the hall and saw me. He said, hey, Jamie. He remembered my name. He'd only met me once or twice before that. He said, hey, Jamie, I've been thinking about calling you. Come on back. And right then, he ushered me back and hired me for double what he had offered me 6 months earlier. And that led to a 7-year career working for that builder. I learned a lot, went out and just got tough to learn every single piece of the home building business that I could. And so fast forward to May of 2000, and I'd been with that company for 7 years. And for the last year or two, I'd started getting to the point where I was like, you know what? I think I want to start my own business. And I'd never really thought about that before, but I think it'd be fun to be in charge and to set my own hours, be in control of how much money I make. When you're imagining owning your business, it's a lot easier than actually running it. There's a lot of things that kick you between the legs during that journey. But I was still in the magical part of starting a business because I had a good job and everything was easy. Every 2 weeks I got a magical paycheck that showed up in my account. And I just thought, the owners of the business just had this bucket of gold they were paying me, and I just had to do my job, show up on time, and not give anybody any crap. And but I had started wanting a little bit more. I wanted, maybe a little bit nicer house and a little bit nicer car and a little more free time, a little more go out to dinner with my wife and that kind of stuff. And it started to eat at me after a couple of years. I'm like, I wonder if I could do this. And I ran some numbers in my mind and did some math, and I talked to my wife about it. I talked to my dad about it. And my dad said something to me. He said, someday you're going to start your own business. And when you look back on it, you're going to say, why didn't I do this sooner? And I still remember him saying that. And so I was a newlywed person. I'd been married a couple of years. And my wife came in. I still remember it. My wife came in. It was a Sunday morning, and actually a few months earlier, she said, "I think we ought to have a kid." And I'm like, "Well, if you want to, sure. What do you want me to do?" And so a few months went by, and it was now May of 2000, and it was Mother's Day, Sunday morning. My wife came in. I was still in bed, and she came in and she said, "Congratulations, you're going to be a father." I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And so we sat down and said, we need to maybe think about some life decisions going forward. And we had been talking about starting our own business. And I said, well, once kids start coming, you start getting a little more worried. You worry about that security, and you get set in your ways, and everything is natural, and you have a routine, and our life is going to be shook up. You throw a baby in it, and I've heard all the horror stories of make sure you sleep and make sure you do this before you have a kid, because you're going to run out of sleep and you're going to be up all night and you're going to be tired and you won't get to work out as much and do all those things that you love doing. So we sat down and we said, maybe now's the time to start our own business. So we said a little prayer. We did some fasting and praying, and decided we'd let God kind of help us make that decision if we felt good about it. Well, let me rewind a couple days earlier. I had gone into my boss the Wednesday before, and earlier that year, a new boss had kind of taken over the company. And when he took over, I was pleasantly surprised that he had laid off about 30 to 40% of the company. There was a lot of dead weight. And a lot of times new owners come in and they clean house, and they kind of say, hey, where can we function better and get more cash flow coming in? Are people really doing what they're supposed to be doing? And when he took over, I said to myself, if this guy knows what he's doing with business, he's going to lay off about 30 or 40% of the employees here, because there's a lot of dead weight. And he did that. And I was like, whoa, this guy knows what he's doing. And so what that meant for me was I was allowed the opportunity to take on some other jobs, which I welcomed, because I love to learn more and do as much as I can to earn more money and to feel more a sense of accomplishment, like that company really needs me because they're coming to me to bring more stuff on. And so they gave me 2.5 more jobs to do from the people they laid off. And but they didn't pay me anymore. And so I said, well, that's fine. I need to prove myself. I need to make sure that they know that I'm worth it, and they need to know that I can do this kind of stuff. So I took on 2 or 3 other jobs, because during my time learning to draw plans, I had actually gone in and sat down with some of the other employees to learn what they were doing, because I was efficient in what I was already being paid to do. So I went in, sat with some of those people and learned their jobs on how to do price breakdowns and job inspections and invoicing and city work and stuff like that. So when they came to me and said, hey, we'd like you to do these other jobs, I was loving it. So I took it on. I did it for 6 months, from January to May of 2000. Well, when May rolled around, I decided, you know what? I've proved myself. It's been about 6 months. I'm going to go in and ask for a raise. So I went in to my boss. I had a couple different bosses, but the one that I directly reported to, I went in and I said, hey, I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job. I'm taking over 2 or 3 other jobs for people. I'd like a $5,000 raise. Now, this was back in the late 90s, and I think I was making about $45,000 at the time. And so I was asking for $50,000 a year. They had laid off 2 people that I took over their jobs, and those people were making probably $50,000 to $60,000 each. So in my mind, $5,000 more a year was not that much to them, but it was a huge amount for me. So I thought I was pretty safe. Well, my boss said, well, the new owner probably isn't going to go for that. You might want to back off a little bit. By then I was feeling pretty confident from life lessons and things. I'm like, well, I want you to ask him anyway. So he's like, all right, I'll ask him. So that was on Wednesday or Thursday. So back to that Sunday, my wife tells me we're pregnant, we're going to have a kid. The Saturday before, I played in beer league softball a lot, and I had worn shorts because I was against pants all the time playing sports, but I was aggressive. So I would slide every game to get an extra base or whatever, and it was pretty common for me to come home with a torn up leg, bleeding and oozing, kind of like road rash. And this was one of those Saturdays we had a doubleheader, so I got to slide multiple times and just tore up my leg. By Saturday night, I was feeling pretty out of it. So I was drugged up. I was trying to get the oozing to stop out of my leg. And then my wife wakes me up Sunday morning and says, hey, you're going to be a dad. So we fasted and prayed about it. I went to work on Monday. By Tuesday, my leg was just throbbing. I was on a ton of drugs. So I called my boss and said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna take a sick day today. My leg's bugging me. So they said, hey, no problem. So then Wednesday I come back into work and my leg's finally starting to scab over and feel okay. And at the end of that day, my boss comes in and he says, you're fired. We want you to leave. And I thought he was joking because I'm a big Portland Trail Blazers fan. And if you remember back in 2000, the Blazers were playing the Jazz in the playoffs, and Portland had just beat the Jazz Tuesday night. And so I thought he was kind of harassing me. I'm like, you're joking, right? You're just upset because the Blazers beat the Jazz last night. And he kind of chuckled. He's like, no, I told the boss you wanted a raise. And he said, well, if you're not happy here, he doesn't want you here. I'm like, well, wait, that's not what I meant. I'm happy, but I'd be happier if I had a little more money. And he said, nope, you're out. And so I packed up and drove home, and I got a phone call from a truss manufacturer on my drive home. And he said, hey, I heard you left your place. Do you want to do a job for me? And I got my first job on that drive home from the business that I left. And it was tough. I never looked back and thought, well, I don't want to get too spiritual on this first podcast, but sometimes you get answers in ways you don't plan, I guess is the message. And I never looked back thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't have asked for that, or maybe I should have stayed in that safe job. But I think growing up with those other jobs made it so that nothing seemed, I never was given anything. I never got the standard job that other people got. And so starting my own business just felt natural, because I wasn't plugged into that work for the company all the time. The first 6 months of that were pretty tough. I had to reach out and knock on doors, go talk to builders who didn't know who I was. And at a certain point, I was, now my wife had to leave her job because she's getting ready to have a baby. So at one point, I haven't told a lot of people this at all, but at one point my brother called me up and he said, I understand you need some money. I've got a paper route. You want to help me with it? And so at the age of 30 years old, I was getting up at 4 a.m. or 3:30 and doing paper routes to make enough money to make my house payment and to pay the phone bill and to pay the power company and stuff like that. And it was very humbling, and it was very discouraging, thinking, how could I fast and pray and have God answer this and then end up in the back of a car delivering papers? And I got to the point where my body would physically fight it. Like I'd smell that smell. I don't know if you've ever smelt a newspaper in the morning when it's fresh off the press, but that smell triggered me. And every morning I would throw up before I got in the car. And I don't know if that's the hardest point in my life, but it was definitely, it made me wonder if I was getting the right messages and things like that. But things like that, I think, help build character and help get you to where you want to go. So let me maybe wrap up with just a couple thoughts about this podcast. Is going to be about how to overcome those tough situations. I teach a class called Build a House, Keep Your Spouse. And it's a funny little title that one of my business associates told me I should use. And it's kind of an attention getter. But in reality, we see a lot of people get divorced when they go to build a house, or right after they move in, or they have a lot of anger management issues when they're building a house, or they struggle with how to communicate to subcontractors, or they wonder, why is it so expensive to build a house? And I think the expertise that I bring from 30 years of designing homes and I've designed over 4,000 homes, which, to give you an idea on what that number means, if you do some research and you look up a famous architect, his name's Frank Lloyd Wright. He designed 1,000 homes in his career. I've done 4 times as many homes as Frank Lloyd Wright. And I've been involved in a lot of those with the homeowners. I've sat down with them. I've asked them questions on, what are your goals with doing this house? A lot of times I ask them, what is your pain? Because usually you don't make a change in your life unless there's some kind of pain that drives you to make a change. Your pain might be, oh, I don't like my neighbors, I'm going to move. Or I just had my 12th kid and our house doesn't fit. Or I just got rid of my 12th kid and now we're down to 0 kids and we need to change where we're living. Or we just found our dream property up in the mountains and it's on a hillside. We need to figure out how to fit a house on there. The pain can be different for everybody. But what I like to do is ask a lot of questions and help them navigate so that they have a good experience, which we hopefully do with most of our clients. They have a great experience. They love their house. And in some cases, we've even had office parties in some of the homes we've done for some of our clients. And so that's the goal of this podcast, is to break this into small pieces so that as you're going to build a house or remodel, you can avoid having your basement flood or avoid dealing with a subcontractor who's not honest in their dealings with you, and how to pick the subcontractor, how to pick the right builder for what you want. Our website at Walker Home Design has a ton of free information and downloads that can help you navigate all of those little hurdles that you're going to have when you go to build or remodel. Even how to landscape your house. Maybe you're asking yourself, should I remodel at all? We have a whole questionnaire that says, here's the questions you should be asking before you go down that path. Some of the things we're going to focus on also are, how do you build a house for less money than your neighbor built? I'll show you how the homes I built for myself have appraised for double what it cost me to build. Some of these are secrets even builders that have been building for 50 years don't understand. But a lot of it comes back to those stories that I just kind of told about, and how to implement the things that I've learned over this time that hopefully can benefit you as you go to build. Final thoughts would be, think about economical, functional, and attractive. Those are the things we really love to talk to people about, so that their homes don't cost as much as what other builders tell you they cost. They function better than what you can buy just from a tract home, and they look amazing, so that when you drive in your driveway, you get a warm fuzzy in your heart, and it's a good feeling to have that be your castle, the place you're going to live. So I welcome you to follow us on this journey, and like I said, we're also going to check out some cool hot rods and collector cars and talk with the experts. So again, I'm Jamie Walker with Walker Home Design, your world-class house plan. Thanks for joining us on episode 1.